What's up, everyone? Welcome to the March 18th edition of DraftKings Tournament Plays presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And as a reminder, you get one free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at Prize Picks. Be sure to use the code Awesemo to receive a 100% first deposit bonus up to $100. We have a massive 12-game NBA DFS slate today. So a lot of injury news, a lot of pieces that we're waiting on. Some of the stuff will most likely change by lock. Be sure to tune into the deeper dive and live before lock in the 2 hours leading up until tip on the Awesemo YouTube channel. But for now, taking a look at 5 of the top tournament options using the Boom Bust tool on the Awesemo.com website. Starting at number 5, Reggie Jackson. He's projected for about 4% ownership. He has about a 7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Jackson is point guard only at $7,600. In the games that he's played without Paul George and with Marcus Morris active this year, Jackson's averaged 1.07 DraftKings points per minute. He's averaged 30.9 minutes per game. But if tonight's game against Utah is competitive, Jackson certainly could end up getting in the 34 to 36 minute range at pretty low ownership and averaging around the fantasy point per minute. Number 4, Evan Fournier, projected for 1% ownership with a 7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. He has a favorable matchup tonight against the Washington Wizards. Fournier, in games this year where Derrick Rose and Kemba Walker have been out and Julius Randle has been active, Fournier has averaged 0.81 DraftKings points per minute, and he's averaged 30 minutes per game. He's 5,200 with shooting guard and small forward eligibility. But another nice thing about Fournier is that his average playing time can be a little bit misleading because if Fournier plays well, he can get more minutes in the fourth quarter and potentially get you 32, 33 minutes. Conversely, if he plays poorly, he can lose minutes. But if he's playing poorly, your lineup probably isn't doing very well with him in it anyway. So getting some volatility in the playing time is pretty appealing. And, his average production at 0.81 fantasy points per minute isn't the best, but it's not bad either. He's a pretty solid not great, but just decent, point per minute guy in a good matchup against Washington. Number 3, on the other side of that game, Kyle Kuzma, projected for 3% ownership with a 7% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Kuzma is only power forward eligible, but he's also only $7,600. In the 5 games that Kuzma has played with Kristaps Porzingis, Kuzma's averaged 1.05 DraftKings points per minute. He's averaged 31.9 minutes per game. The playing time is a bit of a concern because prior to Porzingis' arrival, you had Kuzma in competitive games getting 36, 37 minutes. Washington has been involved in a couple of blowouts recently, but it still doesn't seem that we're going to be getting many of those 36 or 37-minute games from Kuzma. But as I mentioned, his salary has dropped to $7,600 as well, and he's not projected for much ownership here. Javale Mcgee is the number 2 tournament option tonight, projected for 6% ownership with a 9% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Mcgee is certainly someone whose value relative to the alternatives on the slate could drop as we get more news, but the way things look right now, he looks like a high upside, cheap sub 4K player at $3,700. He's averaged 1.32 DraftKings points per minute this year, projected for 6% ownership with a 9% chance of being in the optimal lineup. It's not so much about what Mcgee will do for you as it is what else you can get into your lineup, but it also doesn't hurt that he's a great point per minute producer. And if he happens to pick up a couple of extra minutes, whether it's because of a blowout or DeAndre Ayton being in foul trouble or whatever the case may be, it doesn't take much extra playing time for Mcgee for him to end up being a very, very good option. And number 1, going back to the Wizards, Kristaps Porzingis projected for 5% ownership with a 9% chance of being in the optimal lineup as he takes on his former team in New York. Porzingis is only $7,200. He's been on a minutes limit with Washington, but if this game's competitive, it is likely that he gets you around 28 minutes, and he's been extremely productive since joining the Wizards. In the 5 games that Porzingis has played since being traded from Dallas, he's averaged 1.38 DraftKings points per minute, and I expect that level of production to continue because it's not far off from what he was doing in Dallas whenever he played without Luka on the floor. So I expect the offense in Washington to continue running through Porzingis. I expect him to continue putting up big numbers. Comes with block upside as well. So at low ownership and a pretty inexpensive price tag, I don't mind that he's on a minutes restriction and unlikely to top 30 minutes. He still looks to be going a bit under-owned. So to recap, the top 5 tournament options on DraftKings as things currently stand: number 5, Reggie Jackson; number 4, Evan Fournier; number 3, Kyle Kuzma; number 2, JaVale McGee; and number 1, Kristaps Porzingis.